At 55, Kenny Lattimore is finally breaking his silence, not for fame, not for drama, but to set the record straight. For years, the world saw the flawless image, a picture-perfect marriage with Judge Faith, red carpet smiles, and public affection. But behind those smiles, Kenny was carrying emotional scars, silently holding together a relationship that was unraveling in private. He stayed quiet out of love, out of loyalty, to protect their shared image, to preserve the reputation they had built. But the silence has been deafening. And now, after years of being misunderstood and misrepresented, he's stepping forward to tell his truth. This isn't just a divorce story. This is about finally reclaiming your voice after years of being muted. Kenny's journey isn't just about lost love. It's about strength, vulnerability, and the untold battles that so many never see. What he's revealing will shatter everything you thought you knew about perfect couples. Because behind every smile, there's a story. And Kenny Lattimore's story is one you'll never forget. However, Kenny claims that another tale was developing behind the scenes. A story he bore alone, one of emotional weight, quiet, and pressure. His words, "I can't stay quiet anymore," came at last. The floodgates opened as soon as those words were said. What once felt like a dream partnership now feels much more difficult, sometimes even painful. This goes beyond a simple breakup. It is the story of a guy who, after years of being misinterpreted, finds his voice again and speaks the truth he had previously attempted to hide. In appearance, it resembled a fairy tale. The public reacted with joy and appreciation when Kenny Lattimore and Judge Faith Jenkins revealed their love. They were quickly classified as a power couple. The renowned R&B musician, who is well known for his heartfelt songs, and the astute, knowledgeable lawyer who is well known both within and outside of the courtroom. Their wedding pictures went viral. Their statements conveyed a sense of profound connection, and their interviews were full with laughing. They talked about support, faith, and love. Fans took all of the words at face value. Even Kenny believed it for a time. He desired to. He was in a stage of life where he yearned for consistency, for something enduring and unadulterated. She appeared to be the solution to that request. And Judge Faith. However, nobody was aware of the amount of work Kenny was doing in secret to maintain the relationship's appearance of perfection. He believed that love demanded sacrifice, so he remained silent even as things began to change behind closed doors. Perhaps, he reasoned, she would accept him if he simply offered more. However, the people only saw the filtered version of their reality because the emotional balance was incorrect from the start. In retrospect, Kenny acknowledges that the picture they promoted was incomplete. Although the image looked exquisite, it was meticulously painted to conceal the fissures that were developing beneath the surface. As soon as the camera stopped rolling, the smiles vanished. Kenny sensed a change behind the scenes, not in their public personas, but rather in the quiet that surrounded their fictitious appearances. What began as minor adjustments quickly turned into intense periods of alienation. Once warm and present, Judge Faith became aloof. Her voice shifted. The small things that Kenny once loved, how she had heard his song, they all vanished silently, like a candle being extinguished in a pitch-black room. When she inquired about his day, Kenny initially blamed himself. Perhaps he was too old-fashioned, too hopeful, too sensitive, he thought. Relationships go through stages, he kept telling himself, and things would get better. In his own marriage, however, he began to feel invisible. Discussions got biased. Without his input, decisions were taken. He was not a partner anymore. Although he looked fine next to her, he wasn't really appreciated behind closed doors. He was just an accessory. Worst of all, he was unable to inform anyone. They were supposed to be content. He was the love song guy, Kenny Lattimore. How could he acknowledge the disintegration of his own romantic life? He remained silent in the hopes that she would notice and be concerned. However, she didn't. He hardly recognized the man staring back at him when he looked in the mirror. It dawned on him then that something was very wrong. The distance between them widened as the months went by, despite the fact that the world still viewed them as a solid, cohesive pair. Beneath the red carpet appearances and Instagram pictures, Kenny was hiding a silent despair. The type of sadness that resulted from a single argument was not this one. It was the gradual pain of being physically next to someone yet emotionally alone. Judge Faith was now more committed to her brand, job, and image. Kenny had always encouraged her aspirations. However, he ceased to be a part of that dream at some point. His needs, his feelings, and his ideas. The discussion had shifted away from them. Together, they would go to events and then come home as complete strangers. She would withdraw to her laptop, her phone, or her upcoming TV appearance, as well as Kenny. For hours, he would sit at the piano and play the same few notes in the hopes that the music would fill the void in their house. But the questions that plagued him at night were unanswerable by music. Was he sufficient? Was she still concerned? Or was he merely a fragment of the picture she wished the world would see? Once based on shared promises, the marriage had devolved into a show, and Kenny was gradually losing himself during that performance. After what he views as a lengthy pattern of covert manipulation and public dishonesty, Kenny made the decision to finally come up. He claimed that Judge Faith occasionally presented herself as the devoted, encouraging wife in interviews and on social media. But in private, she was condescending and emotionally aloof. According to Kenny, she developed a story that fit her brand, the intelligent, strong woman with the ideal marriage and everything else. However, she would misrepresent his remarks when Kenny discreetly attempted to voice worries about feeling ignored or alone, frequently making him feel bad for even raising the issue. She gave me the impression that I was the issue. He claims that she would sigh in private and smile in public. Additionally, Kenny hinted that some of the details she shared about their relationship in public interviews were just untrue. Tales of their close relationship, how frequently they prayed together, or how she supported his work. In actuality, she was always claiming Kenny, and I was continuously making sacrifices. He stresses that the emotional truth was far different from what the outside world perceived, but he never specifically names any lies. And it hurt more to him to be in a relationship that was partially based on deception than it did to be by himself. There are difficult times in any relationship, but Kenny can pinpoint the precise moment he realized theirs was done. It wasn't noisy. There was no altercation. Even more tragic was what it was. Total quiet. He was eager to share new music with her after returning from a brief tour. He was trying to process the emotional distance through music. Her eyes seldom left her phone. "That's nice," she said in a whisper. Just a casual dismissal with no actual curiosity or follow-up. He was crushed by it. He understood then that he felt more than simply unloved. He felt unnoticeable. Something cracked inside Kenny that night as he sat by himself in the guest room, gazing up at the ceiling. He reflected on the man he once was, the one who sung of passion, connection, and true love. And he was no longer able to locate that man. For so long, he had suppressed his needs. There was nothing left for him to offer. It wasn't a spectacular explosion that was the last straw. It was a subdued affirmation that he was no longer important to her. And that quiet was more powerful than any argument could possibly be for someone like Kenny, whose entire life was based on using music to express their emotions honestly. Kenny didn't say anything right away after the divorce. Not only did he need time to recover, but he also took time to realize the full impact of the experience. He initially distanced himself, not because he was ashamed, but rather because he needed to experience reality once more. He revisited previous songs he had composed prior to marriage and spent hours roaming around parks writing in his journal. It was similar to gradually removing layers of emotional numbness. He began gradually getting in touch with friends he hadn't spoken to in a long time, people who genuinely cared about him without regard for publicity. He started going to therapy, which he had previously believed was unnecessary, and it was beneficial. He had to face his quiet, his habits, and his urge to maintain harmony at all costs, including his own. He resumed writing music to process rather than to release an album. He claims that even though those songs would never be heard, they gave him a new voice. Above all, he gained the ability to forgive, not only her, but also him. "I lingered too long. I had to know what I deserved going forward, even though I contributed too much." His recovery process started with that insight. Why now then? Why is Kenny Lattimore suddenly talking after all these years of keeping quiet and introspecting? He feels the answer is straightforward. The truth must be heard by someone, not just his truth, but the more profound reality that even people who are strong, caring, and kind-hearted can find themselves in relationships that break them. Kenny has no intention of ruining people's reputations. He's not calling names to start rumors. He wants to break free from a narrative that was never told accurately. People believed he was fortunate to have a perfect life with a perfect woman for much too long. Behind those presumptions, however, was a man who was subtly losing himself in an attempt to preserve a false image. Kenny claims that he is now speaking for the males who believe that they are stronger when they remain silent. For anyone who have ever stayed in something too long out of fear of disappointing the world, and for artists who create beauty while silently drowning, silence, I believed, was honorable. However, he claims that silence can occasionally turn into a prison. At the age of 55, he is at last choosing truth and freedom. By doing this, he is reminding us all that, if we have the courage to speak up, even wounded hearts may be used as healing tools. Not only is Kenny Lattimore physically different now, but he is also emotionally and spiritually changed. He no longer pretends to smile despite emotional emptiness or bears the silent burden of a failed marriage. Rather, he's breathing deeply for the first time in a long time, speaking more clearly, and walking lighter. The man who used to feel invisible in his own relationship has regained his identity as a man who has grown, healed, and learned not as someone's husband or as someone's ideal of perfection. He's not resentful. In fact, he now speaks with a sense of calm, a calm that results from speaking the truth, no matter how late it was revealed. Once more, Kenny is concentrating on his music, but this time, his goal is to express himself rather than to satisfy or impress. He writes from a place of clarity rather than grief. He devotes time to teaching up and coming musicians, frequently imparting what he refers to as the lessons between the lyrics, which are the emotional realities that songs just allude to, but that life teaches the hard way. And Kenny has a straightforward and honest message for his fans. Don't trust everything you read or see on the internet. When your spirit is hurting, don't keep quiet. Remember that you can always find yourself again, regardless of what you lose. He is not attempting to serve as a victim or an example to anyone. In a society that frequently encourages the false, he is merely attempting to be genuine. This isn't a comeback for Kenny, it's a comeback to truth, not to fame. And he has discovered something more precious than praise in that reality: calm.